around and move because she was waiting for the ship to come in. And they say slaves had to sit in their own waist. Night and day, sleep on their own waist till the ship come in. When the ship came in, and loaded you up and took off and took the ship out to about 10 or 20 miles, and they see some say international water. That means, guys, you became a Negro. No sooner that ship got on international water, your great-great-grandparents came Negroes. The word Negro comes from property. That means you're not African no more. You are now a Negro. You're property. Which means I can buy you, resell you, and there was tax on Negro sales. In our society, everything is taxed. Everything has a number. So in the slave trade, they kept good records. And they can show where they say slave number 1 or number 2, the tax on slaves. So slaves got to Jamestown, Virginia, they were taxed based on 19 slaves. So they became Negroes. And you stayed a Negro until 1964 and this time. We all were Negroes. During the slave trade with Negroes. Negroes for sale. Negroes for sale. That's the word. You was property. And what was your property? Because you tax on you. You could tax property. And talk about, guys, 1882. Imagine New Year's Eve. And this is kind of forgotten about sometime, but we kind of stopped celebrating New Year's Eve in Black history. New Year's Eve, folks, were a time that slaves used to celebrate New Year's Eve. The next day was Emancipation Day. Remember, what your parents did and my grandparents did day before emancipation. They were slaves at night. And the next day they was free, to walk free. What did slaves do? What did your great-grandparents do? Some slaves said, I can't go nowhere. I can't read and I can't write. And I have never been beyond the plantation. And me scared. Me is so scared. Me don't want to go nowhere. I was still a slave. I'll save my master. And some slaves say, you know something? I'll take my chances tomorrow. I'm going to go tomorrow. Because tomorrow, January the 1st, 1863, that's the day of emancipation. That's the day I can get free. That's the day I can say, yes, I love you. I can be loved, and I can love. I can have a family, have me a wife. I can stand like a man and say yes and no, and I'll be free. I can fend for myself. Also, I'm going to assume my great-great-grandparents, one of those slaves that walked off the plantation, and say, I'll take my chances. And they say the next day, the slave left off the plantation, was laying all down by the dirt road, laying by the trees, laying on the barn. There was land on the leaves. Remember January. Remember January the 1st. It's cold. It's cold out through the south. And those slaves left in the cold. And it was cold the next morning. It was cold at night, nowhere to go. Had no name, no social security card, had nothing. Had no name either. Because in the slave book, they used to have a name named John, Jimmy, and they left the slave master's name, so it had no name either. And so many slaves just looked down and looked up in the sky, look around and see a barn. They said, my name, I'm going to take the barn for my name, Jimmy Barn. I may see a tree and say, I'll take Sally Tree. Or I'll take Bridge, Jimmy Bridge. I just take me a name. That name became our names. You see folks sometimes named like Tree, Key, Village, Barn. Those names that folks just look right now, they got them a name and capture a name. That was in the good times. Then 1964, rights to vote. 65, civil rights. Those are good times. But some of the bad times, some of the worst times in our history, some of the worst popular times, and one of the worst times were Bermuda and islands were one of the drop-off places for the slave trade. When slaves come, they had the slaves come across the Atlantic, and there was a drop-off as a halfway point where the slave was coming there to reclaim the ships and stuff, and they were bringing parents. They were bringing settlers, military people, get them a case of beer and bring them in, and they drop off the slaves, the female slaves, to breed them.